Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Dr. Elaine Swafford. Dr. Swafford is the CEO of Chattanooga Girls Leadership Academy, the first all-girls public charter STEM school. Elaine, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we talk about your prowess on the basketball court and how that led to a small college championship for you and your team, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Mike, my morning cup always has classic Folgers, and if brewed correctly, I can smell it right before I wake up.
So you set the timer and you can smell it?
That
gets
is,
you out of bed?
That's right.
Wasn't that an ad campaign?
Folgers in your cup. Yep.
And they had the people waking up.
That's right.
Wake up to Folgers
Always
in your
Folgers.
cup. That's
and
exactly
classic.
what it was.
Classic, not country roast, classic.
Classic roast.
Yeah.
So when did you get started on that?
Yeah, I started drinking coffee when I started teaching.
You probably needed it.
I never drank coffee before then, but that was back in the early 80s.
Yeah. How do you take it?
Just black with a smidget, maybe a fourth of a pack of, a substitute, but that's it.
Just enough to give it a little.
Not the edge off, that's all. Yeah.
Well, good. I'm so glad you were able to come and talk with me. And I think I met you early when I got here. I got here end of 99, 2000. And I believe you might have been either at Chat State or the Chamber at that point. But
people thought I worked at the Chamber. I never did. I was a volunteer at the Chamber over their economic and community development volunteer piece. Well, I was at Chat State.
You volunteered enough that people thought you were working because the connection was obviously there quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about growing up. Born and raised in Bakewell?
You know where Bakewell is, Mike?
Is it out north part of the county?
It is.
Yeah.
It's between Soddy Daisy and Sell Creek.
That's what I thought.
And they called it actually the Bakewell Ridges because there were two pieces of Bakewell. And so the African-American population, we called it the Bakewell Ridges.
Okay. So two ridges divided the area?
It was just the roads that divided the area. So if you go up 27 today and you turn right off Macaulay Ferry, that's one piece of Bakewell. But then you keep driving back in the woods, basically.
Yeah.
Then you find, and today, however, it's just populated both ways. But back when we grew up, it was kind of separated.
Very rural community, but racially segregated?
Yes.
And that affected your school too, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I mentioned it was called the Retro School, Bakewell, and it was a little 3-room school building and with a cafeteria on one end and then 2 restrooms and what we call the breezeway. Mm-hmm. And during my kindergarten and first grade years, let me say, separate was not equal.
I bet it was.
But we went to school there those couple of years.
This is not an age question, but this really wasn't too long ago in the grand scheme of life.
That was probably in 64, 65.
Wow.
Kindergarten and first grade. So
we had segregated schools.
You can figure the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, then went off to Sell Creek.
So when you went to Sell Creek, that was... you're going into, second grade, and you're the first class that's integrating Sale Creek?
So then 65, I think my brothers went the year before, and so 66, they kind of put us in waves of who went when. And so I went to a class that was a second and third grade class, and I'll never forget Mrs. Alexander. And I would say when I left Bakewell Center, I always say I was probably dumber than a box of rocks. And when I went to the second and third grade, she said, I just don't know if I should pass her to the fourth grade. But she did.
Yeah.
And then Miss Giese came along in the fourth grade and probably changed, as we talk about my girls today, the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, I want to talk about your fourth grade teacher, but I just want to touch one last thing on your early years in segregated schools and going in the second grade. What was that like? I mean, because you and I have different life experiences, obviously, and I just cannot imagine.
Well, I'll tell you, when we traveled to Sale Creek, it was tough. And I can remember days even up through the fourth and fifth grade where school was dismissed, even back then, because of the racial tensions.
Really?
Yes. And I can remember us going home, and some of the language was not the best that we received, but toward us. But yeah, it was not an easy time. But as time went along, it became much better.
And last question on that, because I know we got a lot to cover, but you're a second grader. I mean, you're absorbing that stuff. So what was the influence of your parents? I mean, were they just let it roll off your back and just...
There were times when they would say, let it roll off your back, but there were times when they, particularly my father, he was at one time known as the mayor of Bakewell, and he did a lot of things for a lot of people. But there were times when he would come to the school and make sure that things were being treated fairly, and that we were getting what we needed. So it was a tough time there for a while. But again, I think that upbringing by both my parents, and making sure that they knew that we knew who we were, and we didn't let any of that really cloud and get in the way of what we could be, because we were poor. Yeah. It was rural, and but I've always said, and I say to my kids, where you started doesn't mean that's where you need to end, right?
How many siblings do you have?
There were 7 of us, 6 siblings.
Oh, wow. I'm one of 7 too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was next to the last.
Oh, I'm in the middle. Says a lot, doesn't it?
Uh-oh.
You mentioned your second, third grade teacher debating whether to promote you. And I know you had told me that your fourth grade teacher had a great influence on you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, leaving that third grade, not knowing your multiplication tables. I mean, we just, in that kindergarten and first grade, when you're supposed to be impacted, that's, as we well know, you go to Sale Creek and you're just behind just because of the lack of teaching that you received. And Miss Giese came along, and first of all, she again made sure that I knew those multiplication tables, but she was also just the person who built a relationship with me. And it was back then, again, she left when I was in the 5th grade, and it was interesting. She came back and she went to Nashville, and she would come and pick me up, and my parents would let me travel to Nashville with her.
Oh, wow.
And she just showed me not only academically, but other pieces of the world, because I had no clue that there was a Nashville there from Bakewell, Tennessee.
She kind of showed you the world.
She affected me in a lot of ways, yeah.
I bet. So how old were you when 5th grade, did you say 6th grade?
5th grade, yeah. So I was probably, 10 years old at that time, and I didn't realize it then, and we would walk down the street of Nashville, and she'd have her hand over my shoulder or something, and people would look at us strangely. And, it was odd then that you would see an African-American little girl walking down the street with this Caucasian lady who really, again, cared about me and my family and the kids. Yeah.
And just from the perspective of growing up in Bakewell, which is very rural, and at the time you grew up there, very segregated to 2 parts of town, to have this person take you beyond those ridges.
That's right.
And to, of all things, the big city like Nashville.
And so when I say she changed trajectory, I can remember even and growing up again without many means at all, right?
You're right.
I would go up in her attic and I would go Christmas shopping for my family.
Wow.
And I remember distinctly, she had a set of white plates, dishes, just all the pieces, and I was able to take that home to my mom for her Christmas present that year, and I'll never forget that. So again, this lady really, set the plate for me to look at things from a different purview.
Well, and how did that change your thinking a little bit from a very limited outlook to, wow, there's a big wide world out there?
I always say, if I knew then what I know now, I didn't know then what that was doing for me, but as I have looked back over time, it was a great opportunity for me.
You know, one of the other things you told me about that I find very interesting is that you had to overcome shyness, because I've never seen you as a shy person. And,
I'm an extroverted introvert.
and I get that. I do get that. I will tell people I'm shy, and they go, oh, get out of here. But, you know, there's always that inner thing. But one of the ways you did, you said that by giving 4-H speeches that your dad helped you out with.
Again, I didn't realize then what that was doing for me, but my dad, he was always helping me with my homework or what have you. And, we were always doing something in 4-H, you know, whether it was showing off the chickens or whether it was giving a speech, right? But he would help me draft that speech, and then he would practice me. And I think really that helped me in what I do today. I had no clue back then what he was doing for and with me, but I really believe that even when I went to Chattanooga State after leaving teaching, you know, I was still that shy person. And I know people, I will say today, do you realize I'm an introvert? And they go, no, I'm trained extrovert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You work hard at it.
Yeah.
When you said you had no idea what that was doing for you at that time, I almost think of the scene in Karate Kid where he's doing all these menial things, wax on, wax off, but doesn't realize how that's going to benefit him years down the road.
Correct. And it helps me today. You know, I don't mind today getting up and speaking in front of an audience. And
well, you probably do it almost every week.
Something, yes. And I know whether it's writing a speech or whether it's providing a team building training for an organization, whatever it may be, whether it's speaking at Odyssey or, leading Rotary.
Yeah.
Who knew that was coming?
Well, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Elaine is a past president of Rotary and had the distinction of being the Rotary president in the COVID years.
That was, it was tough, but it was exciting, and it was a challenge to try to figure out every week how you're going to get in front of, you know, the Zoom screen and keep people engaged, and then try to figure out, as you well know, you're working on the program for a year out, and then try to figure out how to engage speakers. And I think, met in person twice.
Yeah. And Rotary attendance is a big deal. They want everyone there on Thursdays, and here we can't meet, and it's all got to be on Zoom. And I would imagine one of the toughest things is you've got no immediate feedback. You're just talking to a screen.
I'm talking to a screen, and I'm trying to figure out, again, how to keep people engaged and make sure they're interested, and they come every week. And you would think it's easy to just hop on, get on, but again, encouraging people to participate was a big part of it.
What were some of the things you learned from that? Were there some techniques you learned that were more successful than others in helping drive attendance?
You know, I think that, again, first of all, I called them my wingmen, and I had 3 guys that really helped me bring good programs in spite of being virtual every week. And I think that was the success of it. It really was. I can't take credit for that program during those times. And so... Oh,
yeah, you can. You were the president. You can take credit. Because you take blame if it wasn't successful.
Andrew and David right there, and I called them my wingmen.
Yeah.
But again, and of course, as we well know, Aaron and Wanda run the show.
Man, invaluable. And Aaron and Wanda, Aaron's the executive director, or I think the title is executive secretary of Rotary, if I'm not mistaken.
As a matter of fact, when they called me in, you know, they surprise you. It's not that you can say yes or no, Rotary president. When they called me in, I really thought, to your point, that they called me in to ask me to do some speaking engagement.
Yeah.
And when they said, no, you're the next Rotary president, I went, what? Well, I can't say what I said, but Eddie, I went, you said what? And so, you know, I had to do it for a couple of reasons. One, it was only, I think, only the 3rd woman in that 107-year span, I believe, and then the first African-American. Right. So whether you could say no or not, you know, it was my time to lead.
Yeah, you almost couldn't say no from that perspective.
Correct.
You had to accept that. I'm going to jump back a little bit. You were talking about team building. In looking at your bio, you've got a Michael Jordan moment. And I call it a Michael Jordan moment because 8th grade, you didn't make the basketball team.
That was tough.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you were a basketball player, 8th grade, you don't make the team. You got a choice. You could embrace it and get better and stay involved, or you can go off and do something else. What'd you do?
Well, I became a manager. I wasn't kidding. The coach that actually finally allowed me to play teased me. He still teases me today sometimes. He'll call me the manager. And so in the 8th grade, to be quite honest, I was a spindly something.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let me be a cheerleader. I couldn't make the basketball team. And so I became the best manager I could. And then I tried again.
Yeah.
And Warren Hill turned me into a basketball player. And back then, talk about age, we were 3-on-3 basketball.
Yeah, I remember that. It was half-court basketball for the girls, 3-on-3.
That's correct. And
you either played offense or defense, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was on the offensive end, and I was small, but I played underneath. And so that next summer, I had to take on another challenge of, I got a scholarship, but I'm not going to be able to play underneath. Look at me. So that summer, I had to learn how to shoot the jumper if I was going off to college. So interesting. Yes, I went from 8th grade not making the team to being the best manager I could. Mm-hmm. And that was another lesson in life, right?
Right.
Bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
The bloom where you're planted. I mean, it's a great saying, but what does it mean to you?
I didn't get to be the 8th grade basketball player, but I did get to be the manager. So I still got to stay around the team. So be the best at that. Make sure that you have things in order. Do what they ask you to do, and don't ever, slack on the job.
Yeah.
Right? Don't slack on the job. Don't become complacent. And so bloom where you're planted. And then, again, here I come as probably really became good at basketball as a junior or senior in high school.
Mm-hmm. And did you get recruited to Austin Peay?
I did. I got recruited, and that's how I paid for college. Was they paid me to play basketball.
Was it Austin Peay 3-on-3? That it had gone to full court 5 by that point.
I was so excited. It's like I've got to learn to shoot an outside shot, and I get to run up and down the court. Because, Tennessee was the last women's group that went 5-on-5. So when I got to Austin Peay, it was just a whole nother world opened up to me.
So you played all through college?
I did until I blew my knee out my senior year.
Oh, goodness. Oh.
Yeah.
And when you got to Austin Peay, you knew right away you wanted to get into education, right?
No. I left Bakewell, Tennessee, and I was pretty good at accounting and bookkeeping in high school, but we didn't have the counselors to say, hey, you might want to go do that. And so I ended up, as a matter of fact, in the Austin Peay gym where they had orientation, and I met a young lady from Lebanon, and she looked at me. She was lost too. That's a little town. She said, what are you going to major in? I went, I don't know. And she said, let's go to the education department. So I became a teacher.
Just like that.
Just like that. And so I taught biology and PE to high schoolers. So I started out at Soddy Daisy. And back then, it's interesting. You couldn't find and I wanted to coach.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to major in these things, but I've got to major in biology if I intend to get a job when I get out of college, because you just couldn't find jobs in some other areas. So biology was it.
So even though you excelled in accounting and things like that, you didn't teach accounting.
I did not. I didn't take accounting in college because I wasn't directed.
No one really
I wasn't directed into that area. It was, what are you going to major in?
Right.
Go to the education department.
And I'm going to skip back to basketball real quick. You mentioned you blew your knee out, but your team won the small college national championship?
Right. I tried out actually at UTC. In the summer of 77, and they wanted me to become a walk-on.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you grow up in Bakewell, Tennessee, and you've got a full ride, you're going to Austin Peay, right?
Absolutely.
And so I didn't come on as a walk-on at UTC, and then lo and behold, in 1977, the small college championship, we play UTC, and we come out on top. How about that?
That's a nice thing to have. A little feather in your cap to have around town, isn't it?
I never thought I would start on a college basketball team, and I thought maybe I'm pretty good at this. And so again, and the first time I'd ever flown, we flew on an airplane. We went to Virginia, and I was scared to death. But because we won the small college championship, we had to go to the next level and get on that airplane. So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one common theme I'm sensing, Elaine, is that while you may not have said, I want to be a teacher or I want to do this, you embrace everything you have. And as you say, bloom where you're planted.
Yeah, my dad put it a different way, I guess. He said, be sharp enough to stick up and green enough to grow. He had a lot of Swaffordisms.
I like that. So was your dad a farmer? Or
He was. My dad was, he was in 1964. He had a cerebral hemorrhage and wasn't supposed to walk again, do this. He worked for Brown Brothers and got a pipe hit him. At any rate, and so he too, again, I think I learned tenacity and not giving up. And before we knew it, he was up walking again. But he did a lot of farming of the land, and that's what we lived on. Yeah. Those whether he was raising swine or cattle or what have you. And it was a small place, but it was quite a large farming area.
Well, he had 7 kids and a wife to feed too.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's motivational.
And so he did farm a lot, and so he had a lot of time to think, I guess, and create what I call Swaffordisms.
What's your favorite?
Oh my goodness, there was just too many. Probably one of my favorites that I use today is common sense is not so common.
Yeah.
And
a man ahead of his time.
And I think about that often.
I bet you do. So you get into education, first job's at Soddy Daisy. What are you teaching?
I'm teaching biology, and I'm teaching health, and I'm teaching physical education. I'm teaching all 3.
So in a sense, you got to coach PE.
Correct. I got to coach basketball. I coached basketball.
Oh, did you?
That's where I said that was I think a life-changing moment back in probably the summer of '85 when they dismissed me from my coaching job. And that's a whole nother story. But and so I did coach there for 2 years. And then following that, I went to, that's when the city and the county system were separate. Yeah. And I ended up at Howard High School.
Which was a city school.
Which was a city school in '85.
So you were at Howard in '85 and you transferred from Bakewell?
From Soddy Daisy.
I'm sorry, from Soddy Daisy.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what did you teach at Howard?
Same thing.
Same thing?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that experience like? Because the schools weren't officially segregated at that time, but my guess is in '85 they were practically.
They were. And so it was, you go from rural Soddy Daisy to, urban school in
because that's not what you grew up around, the city.
I did not.
You grew up on a farm, basically.
I did not. But once that summer, when I knew that, and I could have gone back to Soddy Daisy to teach, but I wanted to teach and coach because, in college, I thought I wanted to be a college coach. And so I went to Howard and interviewed that summer and left Soddy Daisy, and it was different, and I was young. Yeah. I was teaching particularly young men who were not much younger than myself.
Yeah, there's probably only a few years separation.
And it was a tough job, and then I loved it. I really did. I loved coaching the girls. I loved teaching the kids, and then you might recall the James Map 60-40 shuffle. And so if you were a young teacher low on the totem pole, African American, then potentially you were shifted to then a majority white school that had, and that was not, it was Caucasian adults. So I went to Tyner. I was shuffled to Tyner High School. And that person came to Howard. And so they shuffled by adults to desegregate.
Interesting. I was not aware of that. So, to a great sense, desegregated the teachers.
That's correct. So Howard was mostly all African-American students at the time in 1985, and Tyner was just the opposite. So they sent the African-American teacher to Tyner and sent the Caucasian teacher to Howard.
Again, my sense, this is a portion of Chattanooga's history, Hamilton County's history, that not a lot of people really know about or is talked about much.
I think many people know about it, but it's not talked about.
Talked about it. It's probably a better way to put it.
Anyways, it was the 60-40 shuffle.
Yeah.
And so I remained at Tyner for 2 years, I guess. I think I taught 5-6 years total in the classroom. And when I went back to Howard as executive principal almost 20 years to the month, the lady that was in the shuffle, she was still there teaching.
Wow. But after Tyner, when did you get to Chattanooga State? Because I think that's when I really officially met you, when you were at Chattanooga State doing the economic development.
Yeah, I think that's when I really began to see other opportunities in the community. So I went out one day. I was standing at Tyner High School overlooking the football field. And I said to myself, I'm not coming back next year to teach. And there was a lady in the community, Claire Elaine. A lot of people remember Claire Elaine, and she helped me find my way to Chattanooga State. And Harry Wagner was the president at that time, and he gave me an opportunity to move to Chattanooga State, and I became a career counselor and a co-op coordinator. That was my first job in 1988 at Chat State. And around I'd say 92, somewhere in there, Catanzaro arrived. Yeah. And he saw some potential. And from that point, I started as Dean of Community Development, and then I became their Vice President of Economic and Community Development, and had an opportunity to probably be in most businesses here and help start training programs, whether it was from DuPont, and had a hand in some of the Volkswagen, startup, and just all sorts of opportunities to look into businesses and to create training programs for their employees.
See, and that's kind of what my knowledge is of your background, because it coincides when I first met you. Is here's this person very involved with workforce development, economic development, working for Chattanooga State, spent a lot of time with the chamber. But, oh, wait, she's also an educator, because you left there. And is that when you went to Howard to be the executive principal?
So I went to Chattanooga State, arrived in 88. I stayed there for about 14 years, and I'm minding my own business in 04. And in between there, you thought I worked at the chamber. Right. I was helping with workforce development and doing a lot of things there. And personnel from Hamilton County came and said, we want you to go and we want you to lead Howard. I said, me? I hadn't been in a classroom in 15 years. I can't spell curriculum right now, but you want me to be the executive principal. And I was crazy enough to try it, and had some success at it. And so I left there in 04, stayed there, and then ended up at central office as an area superintendent. And then again, Dr. Catanzaro came and said they needed someone to lead their student affairs area this time. And so that's when I arrived back at Chat State.
Back to the Howard principal thing, one of the things you said to me, you were a turnaround specialist. Talk about that a little bit. Going into a situation where certain things have to be done, but to a great degree, it's changing the culture and the systems, isn't it? It
was. So when I went in 04, you mentioned earlier, I hadn't been part of the community in 85 when I went to teach there. Yeah. It'd been years, almost 20. And so first of all, I had to win the community back over as a leader, and build some trust there, not only with the community at Howard, but also, the faculty and the staff. And so it took some time to do that, and then figure out what needed to change in the building, and culture. Every building has a culture, and every building has a climate. And I always believe that you ought to be able to feel what the culture's like within 30 seconds of walking into a school building.
I agree with that. You can walk into businesses and schools and know kind of what you're getting into.
Correct. And you mentioned, I'm just a businesswoman who leads schools.
Yeah.
That's what I became.
It's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. And so again, culture is culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we went about changing what we needed to change and some climate areas. I think I remember meeting with every teacher at Howard, and they gave me what I named 132 initiative list. I met with them one-on-one, and by the time I finished, I had 132 issues to deal with.
Wow.
Right?
That'll keep you busy.
And so you can't teach if you can't manage your classes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I had to make sure that we were doing those things properly, and then went about, whatever we needed to do to create the turnaround.
So when you have 132 initiatives, there's obviously a lot to do. How do you prioritize those to begin to make the progress you need to turn the school around?
Well, first of all, we went in and we built a vision together.
Mm-hmm.
What is it we want to be, and what outcome do we need to? What do we need to do to get to that outcome, right, of that vision? And a lot of it, again, was making sure that we protected teaching time. Because at the end of the day, I read a book, How to Lead and Still Have a Life, right? And you got to focus on your main thing.
Mm-hmm.
And our main thing was teaching and learning. And we had to get to the core of that first. But to do that, we had to settle, discipline issues, and we had to clean out hallways, just things that build up to now let's go in the classroom and teach.
You had to set the stage where you were able to teach because there were so many outside interfering forces.
Absolutely. And so again, we did a lot of unorthodox things, I'm sure. But one of the issues was the community wanted to come in and help. And so I said, come in, come in and monitor with me and, talk to our kids and meet them at the door every morning and shake their hand. And I had little man Ricks, I'll never forget him. And he was there every morning by 6 o'clock with me to meet students.
And this is just a member of the community.
That's correct.
Little man Ricks.
Yeah, you should look him up. He was a force at Howard, and he actually, I believe, went to Riverside. And when Riverside closed, as I understand, he became part of the Howard community. But little man Ricks.
Wait, was he just a retired community member?
He was not retired at the time. I believe he worked at the community health center during that time.
He'd get on campus at 6 and then go do his job.
He was a community leader, but he came to do that with me every morning.
Wow. Makes a difference, doesn't it?
It made a big difference. And so we just started rebuilding sort of from the outside in.
Yeah.
And put some measures in place and, had some success at it. And then that's how I guess arrived at Chattanooga Girls Leadership Academy. They needed someone to help rebuild. So here we are today.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about next, because charter schools are a big topic today. And Chattanooga Girls Leadership Academy, and I'm picking my own brain for this, it's probably about, 10 years old now?
We're in it will be 15.
15.
I'm in my 12th year.
Are you really?
Yes.
So they launched 15 years ago, back before.
09.
Back before it was cool to launch. And then it's all girls school.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how, and I know you weren't part of it, but how that came about, because it was unusual at that time.
Well, it was. So they were the first all-girls STEM school, charter school in the state of Tennessee. And, Dr. Sue Ann Wells, and that's probably why I'm still there today. You don't stay in reform and, this long, but there's some things that compels me to, make sure I stay on my mission. Mm-hmm. And so Sue Ann, when she came to see me, they opened in 09, and after 3 years, they were off track.
They were struggling.
They were, quite frankly, the superintendent at the time said, you got 9 months to change this school or we're closing you. And that was in 2012.
Wow, that's an ultimatum.
That was the statement. That was the ultimatum. But the school came along because Sue Ann, she attended GPS, an all-girls school. And I remember her telling me two things when I decided to take the job. She said, I used to tell my father when I was 13 or 14 that it wasn't fair that I was getting this advantaged education and there were girls, unlike me, that didn't have that opportunity. And he would say to her, well, why don't you start a school over here on the farm? And she let it go. And so the second thing was when I came along, she said, if you can't help turn the school around, I'll make it a private school because I'll not let these girls go back from where they came. So those two things are pretty, and she's all in. And so in 2009, she had the means to start the school, and she put her money where her mouth was and brought up this all-girls STEM school and giving girls who are disadvantaged and underserved an advantaged education. Simple as that.
And I went to an all-boys high school, so I'm a believer in single-sex education, but particularly for girls. I think there's an innate advantage in learning for girls because there's not the pressures, the social pressures in an all-girls school. Do you find that true? Or is that
I do find that true. And, they're able to concentrate on what they need to concentrate on rather than, you guys being in the school all day long. And at the same time, though, there's a flip side to that, and particularly at my school, because you get to the point in the 8th and 9th grade, and some of the girls want to be in a co-ed setting. And if we lose young ladies, it's either they want to be in a co-ed setting or our curriculum's really tough and we teach at a really high level.
Yeah.
And you have to really work.
And after 15 years of that tough curriculum, I would imagine you've got some students you point to and say, yeah, she's been a great success of ours.
Oh, absolutely. So, I'm finishing up again my 12th year. And it took, I believe in any change process, Mike, give it 4 or 5 years, right?
You have to.
We just started a new Montessori school. This is year 3. We're finally having school. But as far as the change process goes, it took, we had 9 months to get off that closure list, and we did that.
Mm-hmm.
But to make sure that it's consistent and sustainable, it took 4 or 5 years to do that. And we see kids now after that time.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a kid up at, I have a kid. We have kids up at Columbia University on a full ride, or we have graduates now who are, as I always say to the girls, they've taken their seat at the table.
I like that because that's really what it's about.
That's what it's about. And I try to figure out and go back to my own history. How did I take the seat at the table, right? I can remember, Jim Catanzaro, he would send me to the chamber, right, to be on this board, that board, but I was there in his seat. And I remember attending, I don't know if it was Kiwanis or Rotary, and there I was looking up and I went to myself, I wonder how I get a seat at that table.
Yeah.
And so I talk to our girls about that quite often, right? Take your seat, do what you need to do, work hard, and then take your seat at that table.
That's such an important message because I think that a lot of people, when they're sitting there, not at the table, just think that's not meant for me. Rather than, it is. You just got to figure out what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, it's and when I found myself asking that question that day, I didn't have the answer then, right? And seemingly, as you said earlier, the path to where you're going is not a straight line, and if it is, it's kind of boring anyways.
To say the least. Yeah. I'd much rather have the zigs and zags than to just.
But one of the things that I tell our young ladies, being familiar and being comfortable, that is great. But I try not to let complacency set in because as long as my hand's on the plow, as my mother used to say, I want to make sure that my excitement and my passion is not dulled by complacency. Yeah. And so people say, Elaine, you're always on the edge, and you're, I am, and I'm alert and aware and making sure that I know why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And that makes sense. Always looking to make sure you stay sharp.
Yeah.
And on top of it. You have the distinction of being the founding CEO of 2 charter schools, not CGLA, but Chattanooga Prep and Montessori. What's your involvement with Chattanooga Prep now?
I don't have much involvement now, but it was really exciting. I remember after Sue Ann and I had gotten CGLA on track around 2015 or so, and the Allings came and said, we want to ramp up a boys' school similar to the girls' school. And so I had the opportunity to assist with the application process and opening the school. And so I remember the first morning we had 100 men lined up as mentors, and the boys walked across from the gymnasium
I remember
to
that.
their
I was
building.
out there.
Were you there?
Yeah.
And so it was a real exciting time to be able to be a part of chat prep. And then, of course, moving after that and thinking, Sue Ann and I had in our strategic plan from 2014 that we would open an elementary school. And we looked up in 2020 and went, the only thing missing that we haven't done in this plan is the elementary school. And you said earlier, COVID came around in March 2020, and we kept fundraising. And we went in the building in August of 2021 with pre-K through second grade. So it's been a good run over the past 12 years with charter work.
You had no way of realizing when you were a kid the impact you'd have on so many individuals' education. In retrospect, what's that mean to you?
I had no idea, again, that I was going to be a teacher. I think probably I woke up, to be quite honest, around 1997 and figured out that I wanted to help people and I wanted to stay in education. I was there at Chat State, but I had no clue, and I wanted to help those who were less fortunate and disadvantaged and help them find their path. And to this day, I don't think I step back sometimes and realize the impact, but I do know that I want to have what I call purposeful impact. And I'll never forget, I went to a Lent service years ago. I'm not Episcopalian. I just attend with a friend on Ash Wednesday. And I'll never forget, the rector that day said to us, "Why are you here? Not here in the pew, but here." And I think from that point forward, I started realizing what my impact should and could be.
Kind of realize your purpose. I got a couple more questions before we run out of time. And one of them is, and I know you're not going anywhere, but as you look at your career, what's next?
I'll tell you, like I said earlier, I didn't know I was going to be a teacher. I don't know what I'm going to be next. I have no clue. I do know that I want to stay in this work and, to sustain myself. I'll pull back a little bit here, but I promised Sue Ann that I'd be around as long as I could to make sure that her schools stay on track. And so I'll do that until, I'm not able or excited to do it anymore. I think I mentioned that I started this series, Oats, Opportunities, about thinking strategically. That just came to me one morning. I
like that.
I was sitting up in bed and I thought, Oats, Opportunities about thinking strategically. And so, I started a few series on that, and I really want to get back. And it's just about leadership and accountability and, talking about the pace of change. And
was that a podcast or a video blog?
It was a video blog, yeah.
Oh, neat.
And so, I'm thinking I really want to do that. And then I'm about halfway through a book that I would like to finish on school reform. So those are some of the things that pop up for me to do next.
Can people still access Oats?
They can. They just have to
On
Google
YouTube?
Oats YouTube. They're there. And like I said, I'm going to launch it again here, I hope, soon.
Oh, I hope you do. So before I get to my last question, I do want to remind listeners who makes all of this possible, and that's the Tennessee Valley Authority, which I thank for sponsoring my Morning Cup. You can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting career opportunities with TVA. All right, last question. You may know what I'm going to ask you. What would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
If I look back, I would tell my 25-year-old self to pursue college coaching. And that would mean tell yourself you can be and do anything that you want to do if you put your mind to it, right?
Yeah.
But if I had to tell my 25-year-old self something, it's you can do whatever you want to do and don't give up on your dreams.
Yeah.
And so while I've been successful and having impact in areas that have been put in front of me, I would tell young people, make sure you pursue your dream, do something that you really want to do every day of your life, because you're going to wake up, you're going to go to work, you're going to, if you have kids and a family, you're going to wake up the next morning and you're going to start that cycle all over again, right? And so do something that you really want to wake up and do every morning is what I would tell my 25-year-old self. And luckily, I get to do that in this work.
Yeah. And to a great degree, you are coaching. You're not coaching a sport, but you're coaching
every day.
Every day, just young individuals on really how to succeed at life.
Well, I'm coaching young individuals and, a staff and a faculty.
Yeah.
It's all really about coaching.
Yeah,
it
you're
really
the head
is.
coach.
And helping people become their best.
Well, Elaine, I've long admired you. I appreciate you coming and talking to me today. You've had a tremendous impact on this community. You've had an impact on me. I really admire what you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.